Hi, and welcome to Gene Keys with Monifa, your path to focal superpower. This series is so that I can share my passion for Gene Keys with all of you. I really love to deep dive and to take people on the journey with me. So what I love about it is that you get all these aspects and energies and archetypes that it looks like for life and humanity to proliferate on the planet. It helps us to get insight to like who we are and how we live. And it gives us a sense of how other people may be coming to decisions. So it brings a great sense of compassion and love when you are studying the ways of the we, right? There are three aspects to the G keys, and one of them is the shadow, and that is considered a low vibration, right? But I never want you to be sad or embarrassed or ashamed or guilty about your shadow because it is part of what it takes to be your genius. And it's the same energy that allows you to live in the gift. Um, and so never poo poo your shadow, embrace it, and it'll lead you to your gift. In the Gene Keys hologenetic profile, we're starting with the purpose key. Even though the paths start with the life's work key, we focus in on the purpose because it is uh, the why of things. So, what makes it all worth it? And it's really a great place to anchor. So, that's where I like to anchor my peoples. If you want to explore the golden path more, go ahead and click on the link in the description for your free Gene Key profile, and they'll take you from there. So each key has three levels. There is the shadow, the gift, and the Siddhi, Siddhi, which I call the service to the world. And I do believe that Richard Wright uses a similar definition, although it's more deep and understood. And so it's just my quick way of kind of referencing that it is something that would be all unfolding and we get glimpses of it. And it is possible to live in the Siddhi, but like all energy experiences, they come in waves as part of it. That's why you don't have to be ashamed of our shadows because it's part of the dynamic in order for us to see, recognize, decide to move into the higher frequency of the gift. So, part of being human, which we're going to talk about more today. And I decided to put together different aspects. I started with Western astrology. I love the gene keys, a major part of what I do. And then there's also human design, and I love the way that it starts to map out the framework of our personalities that come in the body. Yeah. And so what I did is I put together an amalgamation that when we start to understand all the components of our archetypes and how they work together and the way that it makes us so unique, we get a sense of what we are truly here to do and what we are here to resonate with. And when other people come in that are part of our path. So I call that the signature vibration. It's this idea of knowing our frequency and resonance and the way we impact the world, whether we are doing or not, just how our energy is here to impact the world. So if you want to know more about that, you can check out my vocal superpower chart because that is the beginning of that journey of understanding how we are here to self-express through our energy, through our DNA in this time and space. So we are here to talk about Gene Key 30, line 4. It is the shadow of desire, the gift of lightness, and the city of rapture. The first thing to note is that we think of desire and we immediately think of sex, right? So desire is not just sexual. It is this urge that is part of our humanity of what are we wanting next. And the thing with desires is that you can often have desires that may not be healthy or may encroach on other people's sovereignty or may just put us in danger. So, unlike a lot of the deeper urges and the keys, this is not necessarily meant to keep us safe because you can have a desire that is not healthy for you, right? But the point of this key and this energy is not so much to save or make safe the individual, but to serve the whole, serve all of humanity, all of existence, desire for experience. So the existence is here so that we experience it and see the different facets of life. That is what this energy is for. This impetus to explore the environment of life and living in all of its aspects so that we can know it and master it. In the shadow, this can be something that makes you want to try anything, light or dark. And it really gives this drive again of knowing and mastering. And it's not just humanity that has this drive, it's the nature of nature. It is why things evolve, why we have different generations, and generations are constantly shifting and rewiring in plants, animals, and peoples, right? And so it's because we're an extension of the earth that this drive in being organic matter is part of our makeup. The hard part about this shadow is that it does tend to drive people a little nutty. The Eastern Buddhist tradition marks it as the cause of all suffering, desire. And the thing that Richard Rudd points out is that um, it's not really the impulse or the instinct of desire that causes suffering. It is what we attach it to. So the things that become the object of our desire and the attaching to it and yearning for it, um, and the conflict that we have with ourselves about it is what causes the suffering. The other thing that is pointed out as a something to watch for in the shadow is this desire to make it unspiritual. This desire doesn't make desire unspiritual. So is to say, well, the desires must be wrong because it includes things that aren't safe and sanctified, right? And what he points out is that what we fight increases whenever we're giving our awareness to, good or bad, attention to, is what gets bigger. So it's actually fighting the desires that's causing an aspect of that suffering. What's interesting is that the programming partner is the shadow of half-heartedness in key 29. And that both of these keys together drive this feeling of pessimism, of not believing there's a way out of it, because there is no way to get rid of desire completely. And that's usually suppression of desire is what causes a lot of problems mentally, which is why it drives us mad so much. We're so scared of going over the top with our desires, of letting it lead us into oblivion, that our fear is causing us to suppress those desires and try to do things without that spark. And so that looks a lot like half-heartedness. And so we jump in without being committed, and it just causes us to be ineffectual overall. Commitment is necessary to make things that are substantial. So on the repressive side of this shadow, it's called being over serious. It's essentially when the desires are repressed, it causes the stiffness of trying to like flex against the impulse inside. So it causes us to be physically, mentally, emotionally stiff and unmovable, unmoving. This happens a lot with like religious, when we're repressing due to religious reasons. And so we've seen this in people that just get increasingly stiff and unmovable in their thoughts and actions. It's very interesting how these take on actual physical, so stiffness in the joints, that kind of thing. This happens when we're taking life too seriously. On the reactive side, it is flippant. So when we are indulging our desires and decide that we eventually have to decide not to care if they're against the normatives of society or from our moral strictures. And so we decide that maybe those strictures aren't important and toss them out the window in this reactive state. And we ignore any moralized framework. Often that can mean becoming bitter, because if when we do that, we're basically not expecting support or love from any part of that normative, the majority of society. And so it can cause bitterness and even angrily lashing out and throwing caution to the wind and delving even deeper into desire of all kinds, right? So that's the shadow side. What's beautiful on the gift side is the lightness. So these choices are on the shadow side to become tense, or in the lightness to surrender to what we can account as a paradox. That paradox being is that initial that you can't get rid of desire as part of our human nature, right? It's literally part of the DNA, the makeup to have desires. And that's why the impulse is so huge. It's just part of being, of nature, of humanity, in cooperation with nature, the earth. When you do decide to stop fighting it, fighting the paradox, trying to figure it out, how we can get over or through or satisfy those desires so they don't ever come back, trying to fix it, void it, that kind of thing, we can give into a true sense of surrender. And that surrender is the lightening up. When we're able to really just kind of embrace the flawedness, if you want to call it that, the shadow and the light of the energy, we get the gift, essentially. And that embrace here looks like trust, just trusting life with this deep realization that we are what we are. We're human, we're mortal, and with that comes desire. And that you just simply trust that everything is okay because we're here. This is a quote directly from the book. You have to become utterly helpless. It is not that you become helpless in a victim sense, but that you realize you are beyond needing help. And then the magic happens. You discover you can enter into the expanded state of consciousness that is guiding the overall game. So, in that surrender comes this expansion, and our highest possibility now is available in the gift. In this state, you realize the distrust, not being able to surrender, is what makes it difficult. The feeling that you are a victim to your desires, to being human, that you can't fix being human, right? Once you realize that's what's making it difficult, you know that in the deepest part of you that it is all a game. And the worst thing you can do with the game is to take it too seriously. True lightness doesn't run away from their feelings. A lot of people, when they think of the flippant side of the reaction, that's just saying, I don't think about that. I don't care about that. But if you ever tried to nail that energy down, they would never want to tell you anything about their vulnerabilities. They might not even know how they're feeling because they're running away by just tossing it all out and not having to consider either side of it. So if your feelings don't overwhelm you, if you can be with your feelings and not run away, and your feelings aren't overwhelming you, then you're in that true lightness. Lightness also allows you to become your desires. I love the way that Richard puts that, to become your desires. So not feeling like you always have to follow them, but that you also don't have to run away from the feeling of wanting to follow the desire, right? And that sometimes you follow it and sometimes you don't, but not living in this misunderstanding that if you do follow a desire, it's the answer, it's the completion that you'll never have to want again once the desire is fulfilled. So it takes away that addictive quality to desire. Once you're able to let go of the need to escape your desires, then you can live in the lightness, and the ability to laugh at yourself shows up, and you can let go of a desire as easily as you can embrace a desire, enjoy the pleasure of fulfilling desire, and release a desire. As that becomes more of the habit, the deeper desire emerges to live in the end of all suffering. So living in the completeness of that desire. It encompasses all of the things, all of the desires when you're thinking of this end of suffering, it's suffering. the thinking the end product, the object is going to fulfill it, is the suffering. When we get to realize that is the encompassing factor and are able to be aware of it and be with it and move toward it, and at the same time not believe that it's going to end the feeling of it either. So the Siddhi is rapture, and and it's essentially the highest point of that and of all suffering, of really like actually living in the conflagration of that pleasure, culminating the pleasure of feeling that you're one, and so that there is a culmination of desire and the full embracing of suffering. So this is conflagration of divine longing. Line 4. Remember, line 4 is the breath. It is rhythm. It's how our body has a harmony of its own moving of rhythm, and that it allows us to sense the deeper rhythm of life. And it's this primal nature of this beat, the heartbeat, of this continual movement of rhythm, the way it tracks our beingness and time, and that we all have a unique breath pattern. And when we breathe together, we are unified. That's one of the things I love about the description of line 4, is that every breath is a unification, because we are breathing the same air of everything that was here before. And as it is decomposed and becomes gas again, so every breath has been breathed by all the humans all before us, all of our ancestors, as us today. So we're just rebreathing, and that is our reminder that we're always connected, not just from people in the closeness and in our tribe, but in all of nature. Like, we're connected to the plants, we're connected to the animals, we are exchanging these gases all the time through breath. So I just love that. And line 4, when it's acting in connection to others, and then the shadow is the politician, and in the gift is the nurturer. So in the shadow, the politician is the repressive tendency to be emotionally numb, and the reactive tendency to cut off others in a cruel way. And the block is that you want to reject others before they reject you. So I'm very familiar with this one because it's a big part of my chart, this line 4. And it is this just being so emotionally charged that you eventually want to avoid emotional exchanges, to avoid even bigger pain of conflict and not being understood, all of the things, right? And so what happens is that in order to protect ourselves, we want to close the heart and numb the heart. It's not even just we want to. If it's part of your makeup, then it's a natural reaction to protect yourself, is for your heart to close down. Right? And it can appear to others as that we're just being cold. Okay. And so I know this personally, because if I get in an argument with my husband, that's my first inclination, is to just shut down. And what I've learned to do, and I can't say I'm 100% at this yet, but what I've learned to do is to feel the hurt already, because I'm always hurt before anything actually happened. So I can shut down and cause a further rift that causes more pain, or I can stay open and be gentle with myself, which sometimes looks like giving myself a little space and time, but often just is just being like, it's okay, and being with my feelings, whether I understand them or not. And when I'm with my feelings, then I recognize that other people are having their experience as well, that they're having their own feelings, and that it's okay for everybody involved, that we get to have our feelings and we can have them together. So it allows us to connect deeply with others because we are so sensitive to the emotions that are flying through. So in the highest potential, it looks like our generous spirit enabling others to accept themselves and their feelings. So when we can just kind of parent ourselves through these emotions, then we get to live in more vulnerability, intimacy, and connection. I believe this is a quote from the book, not the Gene Keys, but I believe this is the Book of Love, the love book. They do this through first accepting that they have to shut off through no deliberate fault of their own. So that first shutdown is part of your makeup. So it's part of how the cells function to thrive. And so when you shut down, it's not your fault. And then they can either ask for gentle support, or if the other is unavailable, they can withdraw and give it to themselves. When this comes together with the key 30, with the desire, with lightness being the gift, in that desire and that shadow can look like whenever we are in wanting and afraid of what has happened in the past, and we tried to fulfill desires, shutting down and repressing, or shutting down the emotional reaction, what other people may feel in the situation, just doing what we want in the reaction. If that's happening, then we can recognize that's happening and the potential for the gift to show up. So once we recognize that there's a shutting down happening, then we can look into that and say, how am I really feeling? What is the desire? What is purely the desire? And the pure desire is just wanting. So it really has nothing to do with what you want. But then you can at least understand, do I want to live into the lightness of that desire? And so once you realize that, you can decide, am I going to indulge in this desire or am I not? How do the others involved feel about the indulging of this desire? And now we get to have an adult conversation. If it's about sexual desires, we get to have intimate conversation. If it's with friends and what you really want to do for your weekend excursion, it can be a community building desire, right? Or maybe fulfilling the ultimate goal of the community isn't necessarily going to mean that we are satisfied in our desires, but that we are willing to do it anyways. We're going to indulge in the pleasure of the indulgence and release of the desire. And we just decided to do that together. So if you're enjoying these keys to genius from the Gene Keys with me, Monifa, then I please encourage you to like and subscribe. Check out the links in the description if you want to learn more about me and my work or the Gene Keys. And while you're here, please enjoy the vocal contemplation of Key 30, Line 4.